because you're probably going to say something like, I think it's beautiful, it's nice, and it's close to the beach.
Yeah.
And now suddenly you have something where I used to call cues, threads or cues.
Okay.
So she said beach, she said Gdynia is beautiful and exciting, or something like that. And then I'm seeking clarification on one of those topics. So for example, like beautiful, I will ask her directly, like, okay, but what do you actually mean with beautiful?
Yeah.
And now something happens in her brain. She starts thinking about what beautiful means for her.
Right.
And that is when you go, under the surface of conversation in general. And you want to keep her talking about things that is under the surface, because the more she's talking about things that is under the surface, the more you keeping the dopamine and oxytocin and endorphins level high up, in order to actually come into a point when she really connects with you.
Okay.
But in order to make it more stronger, it is very necessary to use something I call reflective listening.
Okay.
Yeah. Sure. I can go on with what that means as well.
Yeah. So define what reflective listening means for us.
Okay. So when she says, for example, like, I love Gdynia because it's beautiful, it's close to the sea, and it's exciting, and I will go on and say, like, okay, but what does it actually means with beautiful? What do you mean? She might say, like, oh, I think it's beautiful because the cafeteria is close to the beach, and the restaurant is in the proximity of the main street, which is also very beautiful, and I just love it. The reflective listening part is different ways actually, but one of my favorite is actually to clarify what I'm hearing in a summary way. So I would reply and say, like, okay, so if I understand you correctly, you think that Gdynia is beautiful because you have the beach, you have the cafeteria close to the beach, and you love the main street.
Right.
Did I understand you correctly? And if she does, which you hopefully do, she will say, that's right, that's exactly what I mean. Now you're creating something that is very powerful between you and the girl, actually. You understood her in a level that she never been understood before, because this is really not mainstream.
So even just saying what is it that you like about Gdynia, or say Gdansk, or wherever you are, and she says, well, I like A, B, C, and you say, okay, right, so I get it. So what you're saying is you like A, B, and C, but maybe you say it slightly differently. And that in itself, even though that's a relatively simple thing, that in itself is creating a feeling of bonds between you guys.
Definitely, because many guys expect her to believe that you were listening. Right. But it is in an unconscious level, is not very obvious for her.
Right.
Also unconsciously. So in order to give a true impression that you really are empathetic towards her, you have to use those reflective listening skills to make you really understand that you're listening. Right. That is so important, and that tactic is using not only in the field of dating, we're talking about in the field of negotiation, we're talking in the field of politics, and those major areas of the industry.
Okay.
And everyone cannot emphasize enough how important it is to use reflective listening skills and reflect on what that person is saying, in order to make that person really understand that I understand.
Yeah, and sales as well.
Sales for sure, absolutely. The area of corporations for sure, absolutely.
Yeah. Just to throw in a devil's advocate point though, what would you say if somebody said, okay, but cockiness and aloofness could be seen to be attractive. Mm-hmm. So if you're in front of this woman and you are making it very clear that you're really, really listening, you're really, really taking everything in, could that almost be counter to the sort of cocky, arrogant, aloof guy that theoretically she craves, who is sort of, what would you say to that as an objection?
If you want to be cocky, if you want to be that kind of alpha male behavior towards the girl, you have to be built on something.
Right.
I mean, because what people actually mixing up empathy with is compassion.
Yeah.
It's not the same thing. The only thing empathy is that you understand her world based on her shoes. Also, her world from her shoes, basically. Okay. So that is what empathy means. It doesn't mean that you agree with everything. It doesn't mean that you agree at all. And then just imagine you being cocky about something she said. For example, like, okay, so you love Gdynia and you live here, because of the beach. But so I understand that. But Gdynia beach is quite ugly and it's quite small. How can you like that? That is a sort of cockiness that is connected with something that means for her. So that is much more powerful than you trying to make cockiness out of thin air based on superficial things.
Okay, well that's really interesting. So you can still be the sort of, you know, slightly aloof kind of cocky kind of character if you want, but it needs to be grounded on really sort of understanding her. Really,
Absolutely.
yeah, that's interesting.
Based on her shoes. And another thing I can say is also like seeking clarification is also very important, because if you're going too fast with the reflective summary, it can come across like, oh, but this is like a summary that comes too fast. So for example, like, what do you think about Gdynia? Oh, I think it's beautiful, I think it's exciting, and I think it's great because the beach is close. Then it's very important to seek clarification about those three things, because you don't know anything about her just because she thinks Gdynia beautiful, she thinks Gdynia exciting, she thinks the beach is quite cool, but that is nothing more than just exchange of information. The more important is why she likes the beach, and why she thinks it's beautiful, and why she thinks is exciting. And one of the great questions to ask is, what does exciting means for you? Can you help me to understand that one better? And that is what I call seek clarification or request clarification, because that is the true way of actually learn to know someone, to seek that clarification. Because most people, when they communicate, is just accept what she said and move on. So what did she actually said? The only thing she said was like she liked Gdynia because it's exciting and beautiful, but it doesn't mean anything. We have to go to the meaning part of it. And when we are talking about deep talks, people are misunderstanding deep talks with like emotion and feelings in general.
Trauma.
Trauma. Yeah, like some kind of a psychotherapist way of asking how they feel about things. We're not talking about feeling in that sense. It's much more about what is it that you like about Gdynia? What is it that you like? And then when she says something more like, okay, but I don't know what your perspective of beautiful is. Can you help me understand that better?
Okay.
And I don't need to like emphasize it in a strong feeling way. It's enough to ask a normal question about this. So I'm doing with you now. It's like, okay, so can you help me understand beautiful a little bit more? Because your perspective of beautiful might be different from my one. I'm curious.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing. And that is enough. That is really enough to get under the really deep under the surface of a conversation. They mean something for her and for yourself as well, for sure.
Yeah. Well, what if she then says, well, beauty to me means it looks attractive, but also it makes me reminds me of, I don't know, a time in the past or something like that. Like, I'm not trying to take this too deep now, but so say she says it's partly about it looks aesthetically attractive, and it also it evokes happiness in me. What do you then do? Do you then go further with that, or do you then branch off to something else?
One of the most important things here is you have to relate to her answers. So you're not the one, even though the questions are very powerful and get under the surface, you still have to relate yourself towards her. So I would say like, okay, I can definitely see what you think is beautiful with Gdynia. I mean, me myself think Gdynia is beautiful because everything is within proximity in a very aesthetic, pleasing way for me. I mean, the beach, the restaurant, the cafeteria, it's just like mind-blowing for me. That's why I like Gdynia so much. But back to you, if I understand you correctly, you really like Gdynia not only because of the cafeteria and the beach and the restaurants. It's also because you have some kind of a memory of the city, of events that is important for you.